A special thank you to each of our subscribers who make this channel possible. Here's today's story. In a significant move that could reshape the agricultural landscape, the Trump administration announced on Monday that it will impose a 17% tariff on most fresh tomatoes imported from Mexico. This decision marks the end of a long-standing agreement aimed at regulating tomato trade between the two nations. The announcement comes as President Trump intensifies his efforts to increase tariffs on various trading partners, with Mexico specifically being warned of an impending 30% tariff starting in August. Critics of the president's tariff strategies argue that such measures could lead to increased consumer prices, particularly affecting everyday grocery costs. However, Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick defended the decision, stating that it aligns with Trump's broader trade policies and is necessary to protect U.S. farmers from what he described as unfair trade practices that have undermined domestic pricing on produce like tomatoes. Mexico remains one of our greatest allies, but for far too long our farmers have been crushed by unfair trade practices that undercut pricing on produce like tomatoes. That ends today, Lutnick declared. The U.S. currently imports around 70% of its tomatoes from Mexico, with approximately $3 billion worth of tomatoes crossing the border each year. This figure has nearly tripled over the last 15 years, highlighting the growing reliance on Mexican produce. Proponents of the tariff argue that it could provide a much-needed boost to the struggling domestic tomato industry, which has faced intense competition from cheaper Mexican imports. The Florida Tomato Exchange has been vocal in its support of the tariff, claiming it as a victory for American farmers who have seen their livelihoods impacted by the influx of low-cost tomatoes from south of the border. However, the announcement has also drawn criticism from various sectors, including U.S. companies that rely on imported tomatoes for their operations. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has warned that the move could have dire economic repercussions, potentially leading to retaliation from Mexico and affecting numerous industries reliant on tomato imports, including agriculture, warehousing, logistics, grocery, and restaurants. In a letter to Lutnick, the chamber emphasized that the import and sale of Mexican tomatoes generate an estimated $8.3 billion in economic benefits. The lead-up to this decision was marked by a complicated history of trade disputes dating back nearly 3 decades, with allegations that Mexican producers were illegally selling tomatoes at prices below fair market value, a practice known as dumping. A deal struck in 2019 had aimed to resolve these allegations by establishing a minimum sale price for Mexican tomatoes. However, the Commerce Department announced in April that it would withdraw from this agreement, stating that it had failed to adequately protect U.S. tomato growers. As a result, the tariffs were introduced as a measure to safeguard domestic interests. Reaction from lawmakers has been mixed, with some Florida representatives applauding the duties as a win for local agriculture. Senator Rick Scott, a Republican from Florida, hailed the decision as a major victory for American growers. Conversely, criticism has emerged from Democrats who argue that the tariffs will lead to increased grocery prices and job losses. Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego urged consumers to stock up on tomatoes before prices rise, while Texas Representative Sylvia Garcia warned that the move could jeopardize tens of thousands of jobs in the state. Meanwhile, the Mexican government has condemned the tariff decision, labeling it as unfair and detrimental not only to Mexican producers but also to the U.S. industry at large. They argued that the surge in tomato exports is a reflection of product quality rather than any unfair practices. As the situation develops, the Mexican government has expressed hope for a resolution to the dispute. President Trump has also threatened to impose higher tariffs on a range of U.S. trading partners, further complicating the trade landscape. While the administration argues that these tariffs are necessary to protect domestic jobs and rectify unfair trade practices, many economists caution that such measures could lead to sluggish economic growth and increased consumer prices. Recent federal data indicates that food prices have risen by 2.9% over the past year, surpassing the overall inflation rate of 2.4%. However, the price of tomatoes has actually fallen by 6.8% over the same period, indicating a complex interplay of market forces at work. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell has acknowledged that tariffs will likely impact prices, but the extent of this effect on consumers remains uncertain. As the U.S. grapples with these new trade dynamics, the implications of the tomato tariff on consumers, farmers, and the broader economy will continue to unfold in the coming months. That's all for this story. We upload videos every day covering many different subjects, so hit that subscribe button to stay informed. Thanks for watching.